The Justice Department has just filed its response to former President Trump's request to have a special master, a neutral party, a third party, to review those documents that was seized from his Florida home. Department of Justice lawyers were facing a midnight Eastern deadline that is 29 minutes from now, and they got special permission to submit a longer document than the judge requested. NBC Justice reporter Ryan Riley joins us now. Mark McKinnon still with us. And I'm sure we're going to bring some lawyers on the other side of this. But Ryan, I know you've only had it for a few minutes, but tell us what you know. 40 pages is a lot.
That's right. So the key graph that they have here is that essentially they're appointing a special master is, quote, unnecessary and would significantly harm important governmental interests, including national security interests. On top of that, they say that the appointment of a special master is disfavored in this case especially because the government's filter team has already completed its work of segregating any seized materials that are potentially subject to attorney-client privilege, and the government's investigative team has already reviewed all of the remaining materials, including any that are potentially subject to claims of executive privilege. Appointment of a special master to review documents, review materials potentially subject to the claims of executive privilege would be particularly inappropriate because binding Supreme Court precedent forecloses plaintiffs' argument that review of these materials by personnel within the executive branch would raise any such executive privilege claim. So essentially, they are arguing here that a special master is not appropriate for looking at claims of executive privilege. That all essentially rests with Biden. That's not a proper pursuit for a third party special master in this case to be looking over, even if there was a special master who was appointed to look over whether or not there are attorney-client privileges an issue.
Ryan, put their argument why we don't need the special master aside. In it, do they show their work? Do they explain why they sought that search warrant? What happened between May and June when they requested documents from Mar-a-Lago, when they got documents from Mar-a-Lago, and how they knew what they got wasn't everything?
So I haven't gotten through all 36 pages yet, but I would say that the government has pretty much walked us through exactly what they did in the process that led up to this. Remember, those initial 15 boxes came at the very beginning of the year. There was 14 of those boxes that were turned over to the National Archives by Donald Trump. 14 of those 15 boxes contained classified information, including top secret information. They continued negotiations with him for a while referring that to the Justice Department. The Justice Department then went down in response to a search warrant, in response to an initial subpoena, in early June. They dealt with Trump then, and then months later, 2 months after that, that grand jury subpoena is when the search warrant was issued. And there's a lot of information we don't know yet about why they exactly went about to get that search. But based on the information that was provided in the partially unredacted document, they had pretty pretty solid claims for why there was going to be evidence of crimes at Mar-a-Lago. And in fact, they found all of those classified materials along with a bunch of material that Donald Trump was just not supposed to possess. Because regardless of the classification status here, all of this material should have been in the hands of the National Archives. It is not his to keep under the law, Stephanie.
Then what position do these 36 pages put Trump and his team in, right? Put what the judge decides to the side. Across these pages, they're going through their timeline. And won't that show publicly that Trump had things he shouldn't have had? And now that that's out there in the open, he and his team will have no choice but to explain, here's what I had and here's why they have it. Right? They keep arguing. Yeah. Trump keeps arguing that the process isn't fair. They're saying, OK, here's the process. I'm going to show you all my notes. They're showing them.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump got his hand caught in the proverbial cookie jar here, right? Like, he was caught with these documents. So he wasn't supposed to have these documents. He can make arguments all he wants about, some of these documents I declassified before I left. But setting that aside, he just wasn't supposed to have these documents under the law, regardless of their classification level. Not only that, but they touch a variety of issues that weren't impacted by any declassifcation if it had to do with quote unquote Russiagate documents that he was putting out. He can't just, there was this idea that he had a standing order for declassifying materials that he brought back to the residence, which just sort of, you got to throw back throw out, because that's sort of a ludicrous argument if you have the standing order. Because remember, things that are declassified aren't just declassified for Donald Trump to hold on to in his residence. They're declassified for everyone. So that would make them subject to anyone to be able to FOIA. So it's just not how the declassification process works, even if that's the claim that he is going to try to make. And I mean, it really is just a spaghetti at the wall sort of legal process or proceeding or arguments that Trump is making here. It's just make whatever argument will essentially ring with his base, regardless of whether or not it actually has much to do with the law of issue here, Stephanie.
Because President Trump's base, just like any average American, might not know how classification of documents would work, but the judge will. And now that the Department of Justice is laying all of this out, what position does that put the judge in? If they can say, here's what we meticulously did, how can the judge argue, yes, we're going to need a third party? Shouldn't there be some level of trust in the Department of Justice?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that the public influence is going to have, is certainly going to play a role here, regardless of whether or not it should, because this is just so hotly politicized. I mean, it's clear that the judge was trying to give Trump's team any breaks that she could. She's a Trump-appointed judge, and she just basically walked them through when they filed bogus or not well-filed filings initially, and basically, held their hand and walked them through the process for how to actually file something improperly on the docket. So she's, I think, assisting them and pushing them in the right direction here, and already indicated that she would be open to appointing a special master. But I don't know. It's a tougher argument, I think, that they have to contend with here, that Trump has to come back and respond to here. But I think a big part in Trump's corner is essentially going to be this ongoing argument that the American people, or at least Trump supporters, don't support the FBI or don't trust the FBI or don't trust DOJ, which is obviously something that Donald Trump has been trying to promote actively to sort of assist him in this public relations battle.
But of course, now the Department of Justice has clearly laid out that the National Archives requested amicably these documents. They didn't get them back. They actually got a subpoena, and Trump's team did not comply. So they had no choice but to be forced to get a search warrant because of national security risks. And now they've got it laid out there.